Don't hold me now. I can stand my own ground. I don't need your help.
How's it going, my evil residents? Today we're going to take a look at the history and legacy of Chris Redfield and talk about what made him so iconic to fans, why he works so well in the franchise, his arc, and overall why we love Chris Redfield. This is the second in a series of character-focused videos, but it can be watched on its own given it's just focused on Chris. However, if you'd like to watch the previous video in the series about Jill, click the card in the top right corner to check it out. I'd like to start off talking about my two favorite voice performances for Chris in the Resident Evil games. Now, I wouldn't say any of his voice acting has necessarily not fit the character. Like, even original Resident Evil 1 voice fit the character. Say what you want about the actual performance, and his VA in Resident Evil 1 Remake was also really good. However, I would just like to go over my two favorite voices for Chris. One, by far my favorite. The second, not a close second. I'd say there's a good difference in how much I like them, but I would still put him as my second spot, and I still want to mention him because I think he does a good job replicating the number one spot, as well as anyone really could without just, going for a completely different take on the character. Roger Craig Smith, to me, is...
I should have seen it coming. It didn't take long after the fall of the Umbrella Corporation for their bioweapons to end up in the hands of terrorists. A new era of bioterrorism descended upon vulnerable countries, shifting the balance of power throughout the region.
Chris Redfield. When I hear him as Batman, when I hear him as Sonic, no, it's Chris Redfield that I'm hearing. When I hear him in Dying Light, that's just a Chris Redfield game. To me, I know that's a semi-popular opinion to have for the franchise, but they need to bring back Roger Craig Smith. I know Capcom doesn't hire union voice actors anymore, which is why Roger Craig Smith doesn't voice him anymore. But they gotta bring him back. He's so good. He's so perfect. Please bring him back. He had so many great scenes as Chris. He just did an amazing job. I cannot sing his praises highly enough. When we go over some specific scenes about Chris that I think are just iconic, a lot of them involve him. And he honestly, his performance is what makes them good, because some of the writing for some of them is kind of, but he's iconic as Chris. He is Chris Redfield. And the person who voiced him in Resident Evil Village, Jeff Shine, who also voiced Carlos in Resident Evil 3 Remake, he honestly does a pretty great job of replicating Roger Craig Smith Chris as an older, more gruff, more beaten down by society version of Chris.
God damn it, when does it end?
What's that, sir? The mission?
All of it. 3 years trying to put this thing in the ground. 3 years too long.
I think he just does a wonderful job. Obviously, he's not quite as good as Roger Craig Smith, at least I don't think so. About as good casting as you could get for Roger Craig Smith Chris that isn't Roger Craig Smith Chris. You see what I'm saying? Just as iconic as Chris's voice is going to be Chris's look. Some would argue more iconic because they recognize Chris on visuals more than they recognize his voice, especially since he's had so many different voice actors. And there has been some controversy with some of his looks. So we are going to go over his looks throughout the series. Chris's look throughout the series has been overall pretty consistent, to be honest. There's only been a couple times where he looks different, and I will get to that right now, actually. There's only been a couple times where he looks different. I would say from RE1, just everyone kind of looks different besides Wesker, so I'm not going to count that. But RE1R, RE5 to Revelations 1 to Resident Evil 8, I think is a great through line of a guy that just is aging like how Chris would age in real life. I think that looks reasonable, looks great, looks awesome. The notable exceptions here, I think, are Code Veronica Chris and RE7 Chris, which these two versions of Chris do look a lot alike. RE7 Chris looks like older Code Veronica Chris, but Code Veronica Chris doesn't look like any of the other ones I mentioned in any way, shape, or form, and neither does RE7. It's kind of weird. You could make the argument that RE7 Chris looks like RE1R Chris, but I just don't see it. It doesn't work for me. I don't think it works. If you're relating it back to Code Veronica, yeah, it works, but not like RE1 Remake or RE5 or any. It doesn't link. And I know that his face model in RE8 is the same one as in RE7. They just kind of retooled it a little bit. It all comes down to just how they decided to make him look. It's an art style thing. It's a design thing. And I just don't think it quite landed in Code Veronica or 7. Aside from his Code Veronica outfit, I do really like that outfit, but as far as face models go, I think RE1R, RE5, Revelations 1, RE8, just perfect. That is Chris. The other ones are like Diet Chris. That's Christopher Bluefield. I would say, as far as look, he, besides Leon, is the most consistent through any game. Jill is a little bit less consistent than he is. She's been changed a little bit more than Chris has. Leon is also mostly consistent, kind of, as far as look. His voice is a little bit all over the place, but also not really. Does that make sense? I will talk about that more when the Leon video comes up. But for now, we're going to move on to Chris's costumes. He's usually just sporting either his Stars outfit or something similar, or just kind of generic military gear, if I'm being honest. And that's not usually my look, but it does work for him, if I'm being completely honest, especially with how roided out he is later. He fits the military gear. He looks tough. One outfit that I like that is sort of neglected in newer Resident Evil games is his old leather jacket look with the Queen reference on the back, with the whole like Redfield like look on it. It just looks awesome, and I think it kind of is a part of his character that was abandoned a little bit, was him being like the hard rock dude bro type guy. And I guess Chris himself sort of abandoned that part of himself when he just threw his whole life into fighting bioweapons, but we'll get to that later when we talk about his arc. He also has some of the fruitiest, gayest alternate costumes of any Resident Evil character. Like, it's not even close. Some of these outfits are just like the gayest thing I've ever seen. Look at these. Look at these. What straight guy's wearing these? No, none. And aside from a brief reference really quick here, Chris in RE8 I think is one of his best looks in any Resident Evil game, aside from maybe his Stars outfit. I have a personal bias towards his RE5 outfit because that's the first look I saw for Chris, and a couple of his alternate costumes that I really like. Long sleeve turtleneck in Resident Evil 8 I think is his best look aside from RE5 and RE1. Again, RE5 is a personal pick. So aside from RE1, Resident Evil 8 is probably honestly his best look. That coat just looks so good on him, and then with how built he is, and he dresses like how buff guys want to dress when they don't want to look super built. I've seen like super built men just dress similar to how Chris dresses in this game when they don't want to like show off their guns and stuff like that. So I think that's a neat bit of character building that he's not trying to like show off. He's there to do business, get shit done. I just think it works, and it's a nice little bit of character telling. But I briefly mentioned it with Chris's alternate costumes, and I'm going to go full throttle into it here, especially since I'm releasing this video during Pride Month. It would be kind of a shame for me to not bring this up, but I think Chris, out of more so than any of the other Resident Evil characters, has quite a bit of queer coding going on. If you don't know what that is, it's when a character's sexuality or gender is not explicitly said to the audience, but there are breadcrumbs that it could be that this character is queer. It is not confirmed, and it may not be true, but the evidence is there. This is not the same thing as queer baiting, where you put evidence in there to purposefully make queer people think that the character is queer in order to draw extra audience. That's clearly not what this is. Most of this evidence that I'm about to say is honestly circumstantial at best. There's not any like clear, hard evidence that Chris is gay or ace or something like that. I think some of the circumstantial evidence is there. I'm going to talk about it right now because with how popular of a character Chris is among the gay and queer community, I have to bring it up. I can't not. It's honestly part of what makes him so freaking legendary is that he's the main character of this of this incredible longer-ending franchise, and he might just be gay. He might be. I don't know. You don't know? I don't think Capcom even knows, honestly. The main thing that really makes me question Chris's gayness, aside from the costumes, but we already talked about the costumes. I might touch on it again in a second, but this note in Resident Evil 2 Remake, and there was a similar note in the original, but I think the RE2 Remake one is a little more suspect, if I may say. It's the letter to Stars members that he leaves in the RPD, and if you find it playing as Claire, I will put the note on the screen right now, by the way. If you want to read it, you can pause the video. Here it is. After Claire reads this note, she says, "This does not sound like Chris." And if you read the note, he's talking about sleeping with a bunch of hot babes the whole time. And if his cover to make it seem like he's having a fun time to anyone that might briefly know him, because on the surface, he seems like a normal straight dude. Okay, he just seems normal, especially at this time when he was skinnier and he was more into his military upbringing and like rock and roll and stuff like that, he seemed like more of a straight dude, right? But if Claire knows him and knows that he would never sleep with a woman, it's the perfect cover, okay? It's the perfect cover, and anyone looking on the surface would be like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. He's chilling, he's being a young guy, but Claire knows, and that's why Claire's like, this does not sound like Chris. It could just be that she's responding to the fact that it's clearly an encoded message, but it could also be the other thing. You don't know for sure. They never say it clearly. It's honestly up to what context clues you think mean what. We already touched on his outfits, but I just want to reiterate again. What straight man would be caught in these aside from Halloween? And even on Halloween, what straight man is wearing these? That is all. The next main evidence that I want to bring up, this is a little bit wishy-washy, but I do think it's a pretty strong claim that people make of evidence that he could be gay, is he's never had a romantic partner or anything in any Resident Evil game. He doesn't even really have any romantic chemistry with Jill, like ever. The most they'll do is like hug, but they hug so like casually, like in Resident Evil 1 remake and Resident Evil 5. It's a friend hug. I don't know. I have no way to explain that, but these are friend hugs. Okay, you don't hug someone like this unless they're your friend. I don't know how to explain that. It's just a vibe that I get. Him and Jill are not a thing that won't be a thing. No, that's not gonna happen. It's never brought up that he has any sort of romantic partner. Jessica hits on him time and time again. Nothing.
We can board from here. Jessica, we have a promise to keep. Let's go.
Great. A cruise, just the two of us. Only the whole thing is sinking.
Let this virus contaminate the sea.
We've already searched the Queen Semiramis, so I think I know where this ship's labbing.
Jessica, you with me?
Yeah.
Well, a little friendly partner swapping should keep us on our toes.
He never got the hint. What a drag.
Maybe he's already taken, Jessica.
Yeah, sure. Can we get started already?
They even cut dialogue from RE5 implying that he was flirting with someone from the BSAA, but they cut the dialogue. So it's not canon if it's cut dialogue, okay? That's not on the board. They kept it vague. They opted to keep it vague as, hey, you never know. It is interesting that the main twist Chris has on the leading man, military guy archetype that he is that most military guys will either have some sort of love interest or the girl back home, if you will, or like the wife back home, stuff like that, someone that they're fighting for. Chris doesn't have that. That is the key difference with him that most other leading military like archetype men have. He doesn't have that. He very much fights for his friends and the world and people he cares about. And that is a big difference in just how Chris works. He doesn't like fight for like, I gotta beat the bad guy so I can live and go back home to my wife. No, he doesn't do that. He fights very much to protect his friends and protect those around him. And it's just very different. And since he doesn't have that other part of the archetype, it could be evidence that he's just not interested in women in any sort of way, or that he's work focused. Could go either way, could be both. You never really know. As I said, all of this is circumstantial evidence. I just wanted to bring it up, lay it on the table because of how popular of a character Chris is to many gay and queer people that like Resident Evil, and it's interesting. And if you have any other things you want to bring up regarding this, feel free to leave them in the comments. Let's just keep it nice, please. It is Pride Month. Please keep it nice and epic and cool in the comments. That's it. Next up, I just want to go over Chris's arc in the Resident Evil games because he has the most complete arc. His arc makes the most sense out of anyone's. I would say Leon gets close with how much the remakes have kind of bolstered his plot line from RE2 to 4 a little bit, but Chris, I think, has the most complete arc in any of these games. It's honestly not even close. Leon comes a little close, but I don't think it's close. He starts out as his top of the class, generic military guy who's super close with his superiors and is well liked by everyone, and then in one freaking night, he loses literally everything. The man who trained him, the man he looked up to, his role model that he had a friendly rivalry with, turned out to be literally a bioterrorist egomaniac. So that's cool. He lost his team. He pretty much lost everything. All he's pretty much got by this point is like Cheel, a couple of his team members, Claire. That's pretty much all he's got. After this, he founds the BSAA to kind of take revenge on what he lost and kind of fight to make sure what happened to him doesn't happen to anybody else, with varying degrees of success. Throughout his successes and failures and his thing with Raccoon City, he struggles with a lot of survivor's guilt and his inability to protect other people sometimes and his team. The only team he has that survives in, like, when he's not just with a partner. When he has a team, they always die. Except in Resident Evil 8. That is the notable exception and proves that he's kind of worked on it a bit, I think. Like Resident Evil 6, his team dies. Resident Evil 6, he loses his partner again. In Resident Evil 5, this is even established because he can't save the other soldiers that are with him. He can't save any of his team in Resident Evil 1. And he's very much a leader and likes to take charge. And when he loses people, he takes that on his shoulders because he's the leader and it's his cross to bear as how he feels. And it weighs on it. And at the beginning of Resident Evil 6, he is a raging alcoholic. And he was pulled back into the field. He had another team. And he was ready to retire after this, like, one last ride type of situation. He's like, one more mission. The world needs me. I can do this. I got this. And he was ready to pass the torch of what he did to Pierre's. And Pierre sacrificed himself to save him. And this kind of just threw Chris for a loop. I think it's not shown on screen, but I have a feeling that this sort of broke him, and that heart that he had and that drive he had to really show how much he cared for people. Because before this, he was very outward about his emotions and how he felt. And after this, he's very much a colder, more closed off, quieter guy. And I think that is why in Resident Evil 8, there is that plot hole of Chris not telling Ethan why he was doing what he was doing. He wanted to keep Ethan as far away as possible, keep him in the dark as much as possible, because when he let people get close to him, when he let people help him, they get hurt and they die. I think that is why he didn't tell Ethan, and he realized his mistake by the end of the game. He never says this in the game. Like, he says, yeah, Ethan, I don't want you to get hurt. But I think it's leftover previous trauma from him letting people get close and them getting hurt. For example, Cheel, Pierre's, any of his other team members, and with how sensitive of a situation and how volatile it was and how powerful Miranda is, he didn't want to explain it to Ethan because he knew Ethan would want to be involved and would want to help, and he didn't want to see Ethan get hurt. So he's like, okay, I will do this, and if I die, that is fine. I've been along this road so many times. He was about ready to sacrifice himself at the end of the game until Ethan opted to do it instead. And you can tell Chris at the end of the game in that helicopter is absolutely devastated that he had to leave Ethan there. It broke his heart. When you can tell when he's like, he's gone. It's gut-wrenching. You can tell he's like, not another one. Dear God, why am I always losing people? You can hear it in his voice, and it hurts. Like, you can really feel him, how much all the loss that he's had just weighs on him. And honestly, just poor Chris, dude. Poor Chris. He's always losing so many people. He's doing his best. Poor Chris. But yeah, just his arc of his survivor's guilt and his desire for revenge against Wesker and the desire to avenge everyone he's lost and just to protect people, because Chris is just a big teddy bear. He just wants to protect everyone, protect his family, his friends, stuff like that. And at every turn, he's always losing people, always failing at what he wants to do most, and it weighs on him a lot. And I think it's a really interesting, really well fleshed out character arc. Some spots of it are a little but it's Resident Evil. They play kind of fast and loose with character arcs. So I think with that said, this is about as good of a character arc as you're gonna get in a Resident Evil game with how fast and loose they play with character arcs between games. Moving on from his character arc, I can't not talk about the Boulder Punch, the Resident Evil jump in the shark situation. Chris is the main star. The best way to describe Chris by this point in the game and why I think they've pulled away from him as a main protagonist, like a playable protagonist, is because Chris at this point in his career, along with Jill and Leon, they are very much the Resident Evil player that has all the achievements, that can speedrun the game on S+, that they are that skilled. That is them. They have no fear for anything, honestly, in this game. It's well proven, that they can tackle pretty much any threat thrown at them. So there's no fear that they're going to get hurt, and there's no tension in a survival horror setting with them, because you know they got it. They're good. They don't have a weapon. Chris has 2 big guns attached to his shoulders. He's good. Same thing with Jill, same thing with Leon. And I think that's why they've pulled away from these main characters. That, and they're getting a little up there in age, and Capcom has a fear of letting characters age, so they're just not letting them be at the forefront but they also want to bank off of these characters, so they use them for remakes or they make them secondary characters. And I think Chris is really emblematic of this, of like, this character is too powerful to be put in a survival horror setting unless you really, really amp up the threat of the enemies or just make it super action focused with like light survival horror elements. And I think the boulder punch scene is very emblematic of just leaning into Chris as a character. What bullshit is gonna come up sometimes just for the fact of how overpowered as a character Chris is in this universe. I do think it's important to touch on that while Chris represents some of the best parts of the series, he also represents some of the parts that to some people just aren't Resident Evil. Just the fact that he's the main action hero type character, it's hard to fit him into what a lot of people like as Resident Evil, at least nowadays. Back when it was like RE1 Code Veronica, even Resident Evil 5 to some extent, up until this boulder punch scene, it was just Resident Evil was different. And now with this action focus and him being the main star of the action focus part, it's hard to like nerf him and rein him in as a character without nerfing and undoing all that stuff that they developed with him. Another big drawback for Chris that it just hurts, man, is his lack of remake presence. He's not in any of the remakes. I haven't remade any games with him. He hasn't had any sort of cameo, Easter egg, Mercenaries appearance, nothing. He's only been in 7 and 8, which does offset it a little bit. It does help, but I want to see remake Chris. I want to see remake Chris so badly. I don't care if it's RE1, I don't care if it's RE5, I don't care if it's Code Veronica. They waited to do all the games he's in last, and it hurts. Please, Capcom, please. I know this is a video about why we love Chris, but I do have to bring up just those 2 points, the boulder punch scene and the lack of presence in the remakes, because they are honestly big parts of how Chris is seen nowadays. Anytime someone brings up Resident Evil 5, even if they're not a fan, they'll think of the boulder punch scene, because they know that. It's a huge meme. It's what they think of when they think, oh, Resident Evil's not scary anymore. Boulder punch. And then newer fans especially, they haven't seen Chris. If they're playing the games in chronological order, no idea who Chris is. So it's like newer fans aren't attached to Chris in the same way that older fans are, and older fans want some sort of survival horror theming. Newer fans want the same thing. So Chris doesn't really fit what either one wants as a main character because he's too overpowered to be a survival horror protagonist. So he's just in a really weird spot right now. I hope he's the protagonist of Resident Evil 9, but I don't know how they'll do it and make it a survival/action horror thing with how powerful Chris is, being able to take down like 50 zombies in a hallway in Resident Evil Vendetta, all the shit he does in Resident Evil 6, Resident Evil 8, the Call of Duty section at the end. Like, he's just so strong. I don't know what they're going to do for Resident Evil 9, but either way, I hope he's there, and I hope they give him some sort of conclusion to his arc, because there's honestly not much more that they could do with him. To close, I just want to do like a sizzle reel here of all of the best Chris moments in Resident Evil history, at least some of my favorites. I picked out 8 scenes here that I just think are awesome. I'll just let them play on their own, just to close out the video. And if you've watched this far, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, drop a like and subscribe if you want more videos like this. I will be making more videos on Leon, Claire, Ada, probably do some on the side characters like Hunk, Kendo, stuff like that. So yeah, make sure you stick around for those videos. We do have other Resident Evil videos on the channel as well. And yeah, that's going to do it for this one. Stay evil, my residents, and enjoy some of Chris's best moments.
Is this? That's right. This is the ultimate life form. Tyrant! Chris? Stop it.
Wesker, you're pitiful.
Don't you think? Nice try, Wesker.
was you?
That's right.
Chris? Better put a leash on that puppy.
This is between me and him. Go ahead. Shoot. You have every right to. Just promise me you'll survive. The world depends on it.
Who the hell are you to tell me what to do?
Stop it!
Put your gun down, now!
Tell me. We just following orders? Or was it personal?
Both.
Jake, please stop!
It happened so long ago. I don't understand why you are so...
Mia, get down! Mia! Mia, oh God! Chris? What the hell?
Sorry, Ethan.
No!
Go! Go, take us up now!
Wait! Where's Ethan?
Get moving. We have to get clear.
No! We can't go, not without my husband!
Mia, sit down and strap in.
Not before you tell me where Ethan is. I know he wouldn't abandon us. Tell me what's going on. Where? What was that?
I told you to sit down.
Where is he? Chris? What have you done?
He's gone! I tried. He stayed so we could all escape. I'm sorry.